Hello. Welcome to Matters of DeCorum. I'm Scott Corum. This is what matters to me. There's been a lot of talk about a particular superhero movie that came out recently. If you read it straight across as the title is written, one would assume its title was Fan-4-Stick. I'm talking about the Fantastic Four. There's a lot of talk about the Fantastic Four, this particular movie, of late. I have not seen it, but I feel as though I know it. I have seen enough point-by-point synopses and analysis of this movie that, I knew it wasn't going to be good when it was advertised. And the more people heard about it as it was being produced, the more people knew it wasn't going to be a good movie. I don't want to talk about that movie, though. Because if I did, this would be very negative, and I don't want to have a real negative review right now, or even a negative post. No, I want to do something else. This is the screaming child time of the day. I'm hoping not a lot of this is coming in on the microphone, but, got to have the door open or I can't breathe. I'm recording in my living room today because, incidentally, recording in the living room today just for temperature's sake. It's hot in Los Angeles right now. I want to talk about how I would make a Fantastic Four movie. In the early 1970s, my brother, Steve, who is 13 years older than I am, parted with much of his comic book collection. And he had collected a lot of DC and Marvel comics from the late 60s through the early 70s. And that was a golden time in the history of comic books. So that's where my love of comic books started. It's reading my brother's old collection. Thank you, Steve. I watched every superhero cartoon and live-action show I could get my hands on television. The old George Reeves Superman show and the Adam West Batman, Super Friends, the Filmation's superhero cartoons. I followed comic books for a long time, went back, got a bunch of old collections, boned up on the original origins of superheroes and followed their histories and their stories. I collected comic books myself in the 90s, mostly Iron Man and Silver Surfer, until I just couldn't anymore. One, the price of comic books went up, and two, at a certain point, the comic books became way less about storytelling and about the characters and more about selling comic books and four-color glossy art and 17 different variant covers, and then every story that came along was a tie-in or a huge story arc that went across multiple titles, so you couldn't follow it unless you collected 5 or 6 different comic books over a course of months. And I had friends who followed it, and then, of course, there's this wonderful thing called the internet that followed it. And seeing where comics have gone, I am thrilled to see things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe spring up, because I feel that they're really doing things right. Haven't seen Ant-Man yet. Still need to see it. But Blade and Iron Man and Captain America and the Avengers. Oh my gosh. Saw the first season of Daredevil on Netflix. First couple of seasons of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's really being done right. I'm following Marvel now a bit more than I'm following DC. DC is harder to follow. I've seen the Batman movies, and the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, and Man of Steel, all the original Christopher Reeve Superman movies, Superman Returns. But we've seen it's possible to make a good superhero movie. In this day and age, in 2015, making a bad superhero movie is nigh unforgivable. So I'm going to take the Fantastic Four, conceptually here, and build a movie. How I would make a movie of the Fantastic Four. Not talking about the more recent movie, but very definitely referring to some things that can be done right where they haven't in the past. There have been 4 Fantastic Four movies, if you count the Roger Corman movie that was made to keep the copyright in the 1990s. To date, the Roger Corman movie is the best of the Fantastic Four movies, which is sad, but it really is worth a watch. Anyway, how would I make a Fantastic Four movie? At the very beginning of the movie, immediately after we've seen who's producing it, we open with a college-age Reed Richards first getting to his dorm room and meeting his roommate, Victor Doom. Victor Doom should have an Eastern European, preferably Romanian accent. It can be slight, but it needs to be there. They discover that they're working in the same major, probably quantum mechanics. We jump to them working on some experiment together, straight from meeting to some kind of ripple cut, so we see the passage of time, to them in a big, expensive-looking lab, and Victor losing it because he's about to accomplish something tremendous, and Reed tackling him out of the way of the apparatus at the last second as everything blows up. We see Victor get partially caught in the blast, and Reed gets kind of injured by it, but Reed, you just see from the back of over Victor's shoulder Reed's face as he turns to see how Victor's doing, and Reed looks at Victor's face and just, has this look of horror and shock and oh my God. Ripple cut to a hospital room where Victor's all bandaged up, and Reed next to it, and guys show up in unusual military uniforms, or even standard military uniforms. Let's say it's some immigration service looking folks who are there to take Victor for proper care back to his country of origin, which is not disclosed. Ripple cut to Reed graduating and looking down the seats of the graduating class and just seeing one empty, and you get a look on Reed's face that that there's a pain there, that Victor's not present. He's just gone for some reason. And that's it. That's the beginning of the movie. Actually, no. Let's do a couple of other things with it while we're there, because that's one member of the Fantastic Four and Dr. Doom. Let's do another ripple cut to whoever's going to be our Susan Storm, talking with her military father. Actually, no. Sue and Johnny's dad was a surgeon who, while talking to her father about how she's going to go out and solve some of these crimes that have been popping up, these unusual, weird things. And, well, since Johnny's taken all the Kung Fu and parkour classes, knows the Krav Maga, he can come along and make sure that I stay safe. And we establish that Johnny and Sue and Sue Storm are a investigative agency, some kind of private detectives. But we juice it up a little bit because of the superhero universe and there's weird stuff going on. And then we do another ripple cut, and let's say we see Reed Richards visiting his friend Ben Grimm while Ben is home from the Air Force Academy. Yeah, we'll put Ben Grimm in the Air Force. That works out. Now we start doing our credits, but as our credits go along, we start seeing the background of the credits, or we cut through the credits with a couple of different things. One, news stories of, Susan Storm solves crime. Reed Richards discovers new particle. And then a scene of Susan going that there's some kind of a disappearance going on and she just doesn't get it, and there's some science stuff involved, and Johnny's like, well, why don't we call this Reed Richards guy who's in the newspaper all the time and get him to consult? So there's a meeting of Susan Storm and Reed Richards, and then you see the newspaper of Storm and Richards solve crime. You get scenes of Ben in the Air Force, maybe fighting some undisclosed war in the Middle East or over who knows, Slovakia, and distinguishing himself, getting medals pinned on, whatnot. Or you see Ben picking up his manuals for potential astronaut training to do a lateral shift from the Air Force to NASA, because what he really wants is to be an astronaut. And then as we see more crime-solving stuff and Reed's names in the newspaper, we just start seeing a figure watching the news things or looking at the newspaper on a screen. There's not going to be a newspaper. It's going to be like mostly CNN blockouts and stuff of these stories. And you see Reed up there smiling, and Reed next to Sue, or Sue in front with Reed next to her, and Johnny there kind of in the background, just, doing some moves because it's Johnny and that's kind of what he does. And we see this figure in a green cloak from behind. And a gauntleted fist rises every so often. He is upset. He breaks, the news story, figure sees it, something gets broken. He knocks a glass off or throws a vase against a wall or something. Pisses him off. And then the credits end, or towards the end of the credits, we see Reed getting, through the stories, he's getting patents, he's doing aerospace things. You see him shaking hands with like an Elon Musk and a Richard Branson, and it starts talking about prize for first high orbit flight. And Storm and Richards to take on high orbit prize. And see, Ben Grimm show up with a suitcase and shake hands with everyone and just kind of nod like, yeah, I'm going to be the guy who's flying this. And Johnny just, he's Johnny in the background. He's going to be the, doing moves and parkour and stuff, just cause he's Johnny. And so by the end of the credits, we have established that the four who are going to become the Fantastic Four aren't just some people who we're about to see meet. They're already an adventuring group, whether that's what they call themselves or not. Straight out of a modern day role-playing game, they are adventurers already. They're the kind of people who get called to solve crimes and mysteries and serious situations. They're troubleshooters. And there's a mysterious figure in the background who we know who it is because he obviously factored prominently early on, and it's a green cloak and a gauntlet from the back. Yes, that's Dr. Doom, but we haven't seen Dr. Doom yet. The first act of the movie, which is going to be fairly short, is the origin story. They explain why all four of them are going up in this thing. It's part marketing. It's part they need Sue's really excellent perceptions and Johnny's reaction time, even though Ben's going to be up there handling the ship, and Reed is going to be science guy on site, making sure everything stays together. And they have a conversation about how they're pretty sure they've got enough shielding, but what happens, happens. And if we don't go now, we will not get the prize, whatever. So they go up. They make it. They make it into the high Earth orbit, and you see people down below celebrating and yay, but while they are in high orbit, after they have achieved the orbit, there is an accident. Solar flare or some other high energy occurrence happens, and you just see visible radiation pouring in streams and beams and little lozenges and capsules through the cockpit. And Johnny just takes a hit, and part of his suit bursts into flame, and Sue just gets this burst, and you see it just go pass straight through her, and Reed just keeps on stretching, trying to get to this one component that'll actually allow him to trigger the retros and get back down to Earth, and he makes it, but before he was reaching for it, you're not sure I was going to get that last 6 inches. And he gets it, and Ben is just a fucking rock. He just pilots it down. You can see he wants to pass out, and getting bulges around his face and stuff. But nah, he's going to get it down, and Ben brings it in and lands it, desert landing or something. They're not going to make their the planned landing pad or runway, because space plane probably. Reed's kind of smart that way. And they pop the explosive bolts on the hatches, and they get out and start having a shouting match about, there wasn't enough shielding, and what did you do to me, and are my kids all going to have 2 heads, and what the hell? And then Johnny bursts into flames. He just, erupts, his spacesuit burns away, and he yells for a minute until it's like, it's kind of cool. What's going on? And Ben loses it, because he just saw Johnny, who was kind of getting to catch on fire, and he charges at Reed. And as he charges, he's does this Hulk out, rips out of his spacesuit, and the orange rock skin starts to show up, and he's throwing these and he hits Reed a couple of times, and Reed bounces and stretches out, and once he gets to the hang of the fact that he's actually stretching, he wraps Ben up and gets him tight, just enough to calm him down. And okay, we calm down. We'll figure this out. We'll figure it out. Sue, where are you? Sue, and just hear this. I'm right here, and Sue, we can't see you. And there's a scream, and then she shows up semi-transparent, trying to figure out. They've become the Fantastic Four. The tone of this thing, and the music, and the epicness of the going into space and everything, by the time they become the Fantastic Four, you should already be interested in seeing a movie about these 4 people without these powers. You should almost be surprised, even though you know the history and the origin, and there's been 4 movies, you should be surprised that these people develop these abilities. Then you see more news passage. It's like Reed Richards wins high orbit prize, buys building in New York, and top doctors baffled by event, and the Incidentally, one of the early accomplishments that Reed could have made in the intro section is unstable molecules, and some explanation about how these molecules tend to match the quantum effects of whatever material they're in contact with, so that when they actually make so once they get to the Baxter Building and they're all around and they seem to have a grip on things, but they're all wearing clothes that have obviously taken the effect of their powers. Ben's in something that's just tied around his waist because everything else is shredded on him, and Johnny's in clothes that have been singed around the edges and have holes burned in them, and Sue's just in like layers of clothes because she's been making some of them disappear around her, and she always wants to have something. And Reed's are just stretched out completely and torn and overly wrinkled. And Reed will explain, I don't know what has happened, but it appears to be stable. I think we're going to be okay. We just need to deal with the fact that this is what our bodies are now. And Ben has his rant about, well, okay, you guys can walk down the street, the hell. And Reed gives him the, we'll do everything we can, Ben. In the meantime, we just have to try and make the best of this. I figured out how to use my unstable molecules to make us some uniforms, I guess, so that we can at least walk around. And Sue starts talking about branding and marketing, and oh my God, we can actually make this work. And we just need a symbol, a name, a something. And Johnny's like, costumes. Everyone's like, no costumes. Jeez, no. So they modern up, kind of like the first X-Men movie. It's blue, and it's usually maybe a jacket over a t-shirt with the Fantastic Four symbol on it, and you just see him start being referred to as the Fantastic Four. Ben is in pants of some sort, probably more like bike shorts, but he's got pants. Ben needs to have pants. And the next act of our movie is they're just going about doing their stuff. They are still going out and fighting things, but things start to get weird on them. They're fighting, they stop crimes where there's robots, androids that they beat up and the skin falls off their face and they're all mechanical with symbols drawn on their faces, and things are getting stolen. And occasionally, just weird creatures showing up that need to get beat up and vanish as soon as they've been beat up. And Reed starts to find clues, and he starts putting them together, and it's like, I've seen work like this before. It can only be one person. They get back to the Baxter Building, and their security screens up in front of their door are blitzing out and fratzing, and Reed sends everyone everywhere to, go check on everything. And he goes to the big study with the big window, and you see the green cloaked figure standing there at the window, gauntleted arms, with one hand grasping a wrist behind the back, just looking out over the city, visionary style. And Reed, reaches out and grabs a club or a weapon or a lamp or something off of a desk and reels it back in, and explain yourself. And Doom turns around, and the eyes swivel in the classic Kirby mask and the square eyepieces. And is that any way to talk to an old friend? And they have the conversation. Victor, what happened to you? It's like, some of us had responsibilities. And through a series of flashbacks, see, people talking about, what will we do? He's hurt. And Victor, forcing people to beat a mask out of iron in a cave and still hot, place it on his face. And the monarch has a face, all praise Doom. And seeing Doom in the throne room of the capital of Latveria, giving speeches and waving his arms, and armies marching, and hospitals being built, and schools, and all of it with his name or the statue of him out front. And you snap back to the future, and Reed's like, I don't know what you're doing, Victor, but you have to stop. And Doom's like, no, you don't understand. I haven't begun yet. Soon it will become apparent that Doom must rule. Must rule not only his native Latveria, but Doom must rule the world. That the world is to continue. And which point Johnny and Ben come in, and Ben starts, it's clobber, and Reed stops him, and Doom explains that he's just here for a visit, and pulls out a wallet, shows his ID, displaying that he, as the monarch of a sovereign nation, has diplomatic immunity. So he cannot currently be arrested, so they might have some evidence, but it doesn't matter, because he is Doom. I have allowed you to see this, Reed, so that you know who is doing this, so that you know what Doom can accomplish. And Reed begs him to give up this fantasy of ruling the world, and Victor's like, oh, fantasy. You have not begun to see what Doom can wrought, and creates a magical gate and leaves, and that's shattering for Reed, because he'll have a scene where he breaks down a little bit, and oh my God, he's gone and done this magic crap. He's actually somehow achieved it. All this Doctor Strange bullshit's real. Oh my God, it's not quantum mechanics. And Sue, who is in the room all the time, the whole time, comforts him, and they start to work out what's going on. And as Reed starts drawing the diagram of what he thinks is happening, cut to the UN, third act. Doom shows up on the screen. Just boom. Well, actually, now let's back it up a little bit. Small town USA, monsters start showing up. It's Lovecraft's birthday as I'm filming this today, so Lovecraft monsters start showing up. Cthulhu, Deep 1E, Space Wing kind of horrors, Nyarlathotep looking things. Which, if they can be properly represented on film, are not being done correctly, but, we'll give it a pass. And they start terrorizing the town, and they put out the call for help, and the Fantastic Four goes and deals with this. And Reed finds the device that allowed this gateway between dimensions to open up in the middle of the town. And, this must rely on some of those odd materials that were being stolen that led us to the fact that Doom was involved. And he looks and, oh my God, there's less than 0.1% of the total materials. He was able to create this whole thing with less than 1,000th of what he has. What could he do if he used all of it? Then we go to Doom addressing the UN, and it's like, I am Doom. You have seen a sample of my power. You will immediately surrender control of all of your sovereign nations to me, including their nuclear stockpiles, or Doom shall unleash this upon the world, and you will know only Doom can save you. It's got to be over the top, because Doom is over the top. It's got to be as grandiose and big and scenery chewing. And if it's bad acting for a 2015 movie, it is still Dr. Doom. And that's what Doom needs to be. The Fantastic Four show up at the UN and assure them that indeed, yes, that Dr. Doom is capable of doing what he says he's capable of doing, and he will do it. And they need to go and stop him, because the Secretary General informs him that no one can. Latveria is a sovereign nation. If we go and engage in this, though he has made this declaration, and we don't have enough to go in after him. It's an act of war where we're not going to condone any of this. And so the Fantastic Four go into a huddle. You don't see exactly, Sue is for something, and Reed's like, would that work? And Ben's like, oh yeah, that'll work. So Reed says, Secretary General, you need to trust me. I need you to formally request that the Fantastic Four go to Latveria. And, against his better wishes, the Secretary General does this. Reed Richards, I need you and the Fantastic Four to go to that building and stop Dr. Doom. And the Fantastic Four, as one, give him the finger all at once. It makes the news with all their fingers blurred out. And it's like, so United Nations disavows Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four are on their own. And so when they go to Latveria, they are an independent entity and do not threaten anyone's sovereignty, because they are going to, they're not threatening war because they are individuals going to fight a sovereign nation. There is a battle. It is huge. Doom is summoning Cthulhu monsters. He's already got the gateway devices positioned exactly where they need to. There is a countdown. The gateways start to open. You can see into the nether realms and the outside, and the claws start to come through. And it's clobbering time. And something that needs to get punched very badly gets punched as hard as the thing can punch it. And boom. They've beaten Doom. He's down, and you know you cannot stop me. I will be back. I will do more. Doom cannot be halted. Not unless you are ready to kill me. And Reed thinks about it. Reed thinks about it very seriously. And, Sue's telling him not to, and Ben just kind of turns his back and goes, what's got to happen happens. And he's about to do it. When children from Latveria start to come in and throw themselves on top of Doom to protect him. And their mothers come in and put themselves up, and Sue does, the flashback to looking around Latveria and seeing the hospitals and the schools, and she puts a hand on Reed's shoulder and says, Reed, he's their king. We can't take him away. All the hospitals, all the schools, he didn't just put his name on them, he built them. They wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for him. So, Reed lays it down. Okay. We can't do anything to you here, but you can't do anything to us out there. And if you set a foot outside of this country, we will be there to kick it back in. And, they leave and show up to much accolade. And, the end credits start to roll, but just like during the opening, we saw a bunch of Reed stuff happening and Doom reacting from the back. As things go on, we start to see Doom stories showing up on CNN. Doom extends his relations to this country. Doom backs trade embargo. Doom announces proliferation of, or announces Latvian military stockpile, and just see Reed sitting back, maybe with a pipe, just getting more and more angry as time goes on. Then we go to the full credits, and they roll, but it's more of a movie. End credit scene. And the end credit scene is this Doom having this doorway. And it opens up, and all you see are white space with black stars, and it's obviously a negative image of space and the earth, and it zooms in, and you see this monstrous creature with this obvious weapon-looking club thing gluing on the end, and Doom just looks at him and goes, I am Doom. We must talk. At some point in time during the movie, Stan Lee has a cameo. Mailman of the Baxter Buildings, always a good one for that. It is a traditional superhero movie. It uses some elements that have come out recently. Reed is successful from the beginning. He's not this wimpy kid who never gets a break and all of a sudden someone offers him. No. He's a successful inventor. He's an entrepreneur, and he's He's got stuff under his belt, the pogo plane and the Fantastic Car and things like that. He's already, you established that he's built those things. Sue is a adventurer. She's an investigator. She's competent. She's keenly perceptive and really aware of what's going on around her. Johnny is a competent fighter, an athlete capable of doing parkour. He's not the brightest bulb in the pack, but he is gifted with inspiration. Ben is a military character, well-structured, well-built, very disciplined, and with a fueled by the desire to go to the stars, and then he becomes this tragic, why am I the one trapped in rock? Why am I the guy who can't walk down the street anymore? And he deals with it because he's a very disciplined character, but there's always an undercurrent there. Doom needs to be Doom. Doom needs to be the ruler of a nation covered in high-tech armor, a master of technology and magic, a megalomaniac, an overacted parody of a villain. Because that is Doom. Doom does not need to be intimately involved in the origin of the Fantastic Four, and shouldn't be. Reed is intimately involved in Doom's origin. But Doom should not be intimately involved in the Fantastic Four's origin. When it comes right down to it, it's about Reed and Doom. Or rather, there should be a scene there towards the end as they're going into the last fight where Doom, it's about your pride, is it not, Richards? You and me, Victor Von Doom and Reed Richards. It will come down to that pride again, you and me. And Reed will look at him and go, it is about my pride, but not about my pride in me. It's about my pride in us. You're not fighting Reed Richards. You're fighting the Fantastic Four. And then Doom should probably get his ass kicked. Other scenes that have jumped to my head is, as the fight goes on, Doom's like, very well. When you put all of your exploits on television, one can use their intellect and perception and find your weaknesses. And then he's constructed these individual traps for each of them, including this thing to fight Ben that is just this huge thing made out of lunar titanium alloyed with alchemical elements forged in a heat at the same temperature as the surface of the sun. And so that fight goes poorly. Everyone deals with their individual things poorly until Reed says, when you talk too much, other people can use their intellect and their perception and work out the weaknesses in your plans. Johnny, when you max out, you're a little bit hotter than the surface of the sun, aren't you? And Johnny's like, sure am. He's like, get Ben's thing. And they swap out and teamwork. Teamwork, relationships, family. That's the Fantastic Four. You start building that at the beginning of the movie. If you're going to have them meet, it should look like puzzle pieces falling together. It should look like a really good adventuring party actually meeting for that first time. And, oh, wow, these characters really work well together. Okay, let's move on. Let's have an adventure. And so that when you get these news stories or see them in action in little vignettes of Johnny doing parkour in midair and catching flame and flame on, and Ben coming up, it's clobbering time, that you see how this is developed from the people that they were into these superheroes. They were heroes before. They were adventurers before. And they've transformed from heroes to superheroes. They'd have gone and done all this stuff before without the strange powers. They got the powers now. What do they do with them? You know what? We do what's right. We do what we've always done. The right thing. Let's go make everything right, or at least as many things as we can. It should be grand. It should be big. When you see the Fantastic Four doing stuff together, you should look at it and you should have at some place in your mind, wow, that is actually fantastic. It should be. Looking at the action sequences, looking at the fight scenes, looking at what they accomplish with their relationships and family, with their teamwork, people should look at it and go, that's fantastic. I don't mind the occasional dark and gritty reboot. Sometimes that helps a franchise out. But if your dark and gritty diminishes the quality of your heroes, if you need to make these superlative, extraordinary human beings who were extraordinary human beings before they ever got bombarded by cosmic rays, if you need to make them shy or losers some way, if they need to be that socially awkward, yeah, Reed Richards is socially awkward, but he makes up for it by being really, really stupid smart. It's like, yeah, I'm sorry that I'm not dealing with your party very well. Did I tell you that I cured cancer last week? Yeah, it's the best thing, and it was actually really simple. Can I tell you about it? There's a quality that you don't want to lose. You don't want to lose the fact that these are bigger than life characters. They are bigger than life, painted broad, and just impressive individuals in and of their own right. It's the storytelling involved. You need to tell the story of superheroes. And you need to have a lot of action, a lot of bam pow biff. But while you're engaging in the bam pow biff, you need to be seeing interplay, interaction, repartee, not just between the villain and the heroes, but how the Fantastic Four work out, how they are going to be the people, how they do things together, how what the actions of one are reflected in what the others have to deal with, and vice versa. Just like a role-playing game. A lot of superhero movies you can't really do the way you would do a role-playing game because it's Batman and everyone else, and unless Batman's the NPC and everyone else is playing villains, then Batman would be the only player, and there's not a lot of interaction there. Even if it's like Batman and Robin, or Batman and his butler, or Batman and Commissioner Gordon, Batman's the hero, Batman's the focus, Superman the same way. Any individual superhero on the screen has to get dealt with as that's storytelling, and that's a little bit harder to deal with, as though it were a role-playing game. When you get the Avengers, when you get the Fantastic Four, when you get the Guardians of the Galaxy, you're talking about characters interacting exactly the same way that they interact when you're sitting at a table and rolling dice. And the more like a role-playing group, that group of characters, the more like a successful role-playing group, that group of characters in the movie acts, the better the quality of the movie. Guardians of the Galaxy in particular, if those characters hadn't have had their problems, and I've had guys like Drax in my games. Not that they were not they couldn't get the metaphors, but you know what? There's not a lot going on, so I'm going to go call the bad guy. Fuck this noise. I'm going to go get some stuff done. Yeah, I totally have those people in my games. When the director of the movie and the writer are more like the game master, and these characters are having to deal with things, success or fail, you have obstacles. You need to overcome them. It's the job of the person putting those obstacles up to make sure that it's not possible always for one person to deal with those alone, or that there's stuff that's specific to everyone. And the interaction. I've got good role play. I'm spoiled. I've got really good role playing groups right now, and they talk to each other, that they joke with each other, occasionally mistrust each other, and just have to keep working and get things done. And that's when you get this really good dynamic that has proven exceptionally successful when you apply it to superhero movies. Exceptionally successful. It's not hard. It really isn't. You just have to understand that's a perspective to come at it from. These are adventurers. That's what superhero groups end up being in the comic books. You've got 4 people who've been bathed in radiation and can do weird stuff now, and all of a sudden the government is calling them to go solve crimes perpetrated by superpowered supervillains. Yeah, that's an adventuring group. I've had whole campaigns start off on much lighter justification than that. It just bothers me that it could be done so much better. And still, people think that they need to mess with that formula to come up with something avant-garde or original or edgy, and it just comes off as bad. I like me some bad movies, but there's a limit. Well, next time, hopefully I'm going to talk about, I've got a plan to talk about some more role-playing related things. For now, I'm Scott Corum. This is What Matters to Me. I'll see you next time on the next Matters of DeCorum.